Good day, I'm Anka and today we'll be discussing empiricism. There are mainly three empirical anchor points. Number one, the only true sense of knowledge is sensory experience, in other words, what you touch, taste, hear, smell, and see. The second one, unless it's founded on a strong basis of sensory experience, reason is an untrustworthy and insufficient path to knowledge. The third one, apart from experience, there's no proof of intrinsic thoughts within the mind. The tabula rasa. The concept of intrinsic knowledge, in other words, rationalism, assumes that some information is present from birth. This is not the same as the claiming that one sort of knowledge are a priori or true by definition. Empirists would not wish to dispute, for example, that all 17th and 18th century painters were males, is an independently reality. They would, on the other hand, dispute that such a reality could be innate. For empirists, the mind is a tabula rasa, which in Latin means blank slate. It is as though our minds are being scribbled on as we learn or encounter new things. For rationalists, the mind is comparable to a computer. The hardware, or innate concepts, already perform some function before the software, for example the experience and specialized knowledge, is installed. Simple concepts. The empirists wish to argue that all of our thoughts are based on our experiences. The question is, how do we comprehend the world? Locke believed that our experience endowed us with basic and complicated thoughts. Simple examples are the color of a rose, the aroma of coffee, the taste of sugar, or the sensation of heat. Following that, we utilize these concepts as the foundation for contemplation, integration, and comparing them to construct complex thoughts in order to comprehend the world. An example of this is the employment of the pointillism method by painters such as George Seurat. Small strokes or dots of color are applied to a surface with this method. The conclusion is that they visibly mix together from a distance. Dot art is more current title for it, and it is founded on earlier artists' expertise and experiences. Primary and secondary characteristics. How can we determine which of our sensations are accurate or real if we reject, as the empirists do, the notion that all our knowledge derives from logical principles? In response, Locke proposed that they exist of fundamental and secondary characteristics. Let's start by thinking about an object like a table. According to Locke, certain characteristics of the table are basic characteristics of the thing, such as the form, the size of the table, and the shape, while other characteristics are generated by powers inside the object itself that work on our senses to produce the feeling and perception. Then factors like flavor, warmth, and color are secondary attributes. The basic goal Locke was attempting was to limit knowledge to what may be called primary attributes. So in terms of the table, its dimensions, form, and weight are set and quantifiable. Its color, on the other hand, is a matter of personal preference. Empirical understanding. Locke believed that knowledge could be classified according to how concepts were contrasted. For example, the concept of black might be contrasted with that of white. Other concepts such as light and fire appear to share a common source. These methods of gathering knowledge according to Locke are the primary techniques by which humans go from simple to complicated thoughts. But how reliable is this information? According to Locke, there are three main categories of knowledge, namely intuitive, demonstrative, and sensitive knowledge. Intuitive knowledge, because it looks the clearest to us and it is the hardest to refute, intuitive knowledge is the most definite. This would include statements like, I have a body, black is not white, and in Locke's opinion, God exists. They are so evident that we automatically accept them. Demonstrative is when we start combining straightforward concepts to create more complicated ones. We are making a point. Sensitive. The type of knowledge is the most questionable since it's based only on sensory data. If I glance to see how many chairs are in another room, I'm depending on sensitive knowledge, which as this gets shown may be incorrect in some instances. Berkeley and idealistic thinking. While Locke's idea of fundamental and secondary characteristics was meant to help us understand the boundaries of knowledge, it also had an unforeseen consequence. Locke maintained that some of the information we acquire via our senses is subjective. Subjective means of feeling and could not be trusted, secondary characteristics, while other information may require objective, logical, and represent reliable knowledge, primary qualities. According to Locke, the item that held these many properties, the substances, could never truly be recognized in itself. Consider the table once more. We can be aware of features like its color or texture, secondary characteristics, as well as its form and size, primary qualities. However, we cannot know the object itself, since our experience with the table will fall into one of those two groups. According to Irish philosopher George Berkeley, if we all ever observe our secondary or primary features, how can we know that substance exists? In other words, matter may or may not exist. The viewpoint is known as idealism. Let's take another look at the image on the left. Berkeley asserts the following 2 points. First of all we know is what we discover via experiences. Second of all, we can never know or even comprehend a material reality that apparently exists outside of our own private experience. Conclusion, from Locke's empiricism to the rejection of an independently existent universe of matter. Locke's critique by Berkeley. Berkeley believed that by questioning the senses, Locke and other philosophers had paved the way for skepticism. Berkeley made an effort to demonstrate that experiences were in the perceiver rather than the powers in the things themselves, as Locke believed. This suggests that since the item does not exist independently of how we perceive it, it does not require any abilities to generate impacts on our senses. Berkeley can now refute the skepticism claim that we don't perceive things for what they truly are. To be is to be perceived, declared Berkeley. David Hume. Hume was also an empiricist, believing that all knowledge of the universe derives from experience. He holds extreme ideals. He refers to the contents of consciousness as perception. Perception includes our first-hand experiences, which he refers to as impressions. Two categories of impressions exist. First of all, impression of sense of data such as visual data, sounds, odors, taste, and touch. Second of all, personal impressions, internal impressions, are made from the contents of our psychological experiences. Perception also contains ideas or the contents of our memory and imagination as defined by Hume. Our impressions are more accurate and reliable than the copies we discover in our thoughts. Then why? Because a notion must be linked to our first impression, or a mixture of sensations in order to have any credibility. Hume held that there is a significant disconnect between reason and reality. He concurs with rationalists that the logical connection between our concepts must exist and are absolutely certain. For instance, the idea of a triangle must have 180 degrees. However, this conclusion just demonstrates how a group of concepts relate to one another. It doesn't prove that this geometrical rule holds true in reality. Hume argued that the only way to know this fact is by observation. The fact that this idea has always held true when we have used it to build structures does not imply that we will continue to do so in future. Relationships between concepts and more precisely mental relationships are always true, whereas matter of fact or matter of life is not always true. According to Hume, we can dispute any matter of fact, such as the sun rising in the morning. We feel certain about facts, about the world because of our expectations, which are based on previous experiences. From here, Hume pushes empiricism to its logical conclusion. The likelihood that the future will resemble the past is not clear. A small sample size makes it impossible to demonstrate a required fact. For instance, just as though something has happened 100 times doesn't guarantee that it will happen again. Additionally, Hume believes that miracles are implausible since they have not been witnessed frequently enough. Can this opinion be contested? Hume believes that Locke and Berkeley have not consistently explored the ramifications of their theories. The main thrust of Hume's argument is as follows. How can we know anything about what exists outside our experience if we all know is what included in our experience? Hume argues that the only thing we know are the innermost workings of our thoughts. The only thing we can follow is what we have gone through. It is impossible to tell the difference between how something seems to us and how it actually is. We are unable to have knowledge or any reality that is not meditated by this mind. Knowledge is the only source of perception. Empiricism supports the idea that experience is the only source of knowledge, or that information can only be acquired via senses. Only one believes that knowledge can be acquired by the senses may challenge this type of empiricism. According to Hume, there is no beliefs that may be deemed reasonable when it comes to unknowable facts. However, Hume's philosophy concludes that the notion that no knowledge and no science are attainable. Ham rejects inductive reasoning, logical justification. According to him, we accept reasoning based on previous experiences as the criteria for future judgment. It is only probable. He asserts that the relationship between cause and effect is the foundation for all existence related to arguments. Reality is consistent with the sense of perception. Admitting that the sense perception are the basis knowledge, agnostic believe that knowledge is true when sense perceptions are compatible with reality, but untrue when they are inconsistent. According to Ham, the mind never has anything present to it save sensation and cannot possibly achieve any awareness of the relations of objects. Additionally, they minimize all knowledge to sensory perception. They are unable to articulate how certain thoughts and ideas cannot be reduced to sensual feelings and visuals. Empiricism theory implications for comprehending the arts. The concept that sensory experience has a distinctive feature of its own hand, and as such has traits that cannot be recorded verbally and such will always elude classification for the purpose of knowledge, or become its own form of knowledge. This may appear to be the perception of Dewey's thesis. However, the emphasis here is on sensory experience rather than creative experience. We must be cautious on the ambiguity of the term aesthetic, which might relate to either the latter definition encompassed concepts of a certain type of feeling, experience, or discipline that Bell, Greenberg, and Dewey each attempted to establish for art. However, the state of sensory experience or aesthetics, in the ancient Greek sense, must also be considered. Greenberg's formalism is bolstered by the assertion that the lines, colors, and patterns of a painting should contain themselves solely to what he has applied a visual experience, and make no reference to anything given in orders of experience. Another step is taken here to affirm the integrity of art by defining visual experience as exclusive area with its own order. As the empiricist, Locke bases his theory of knowing on a sense experience, as opposed to rational thinkers of Descartes and Leibniz who prioritize reason and intellectual concepts. For Locke, the fundamental components of human knowledge are simple concepts derived by sense and contemplation. According to Locke, the coldness and hardness which a man feels in a piece of ice, being as distinct ideas in the minds, and the smell of the whiteness of a lily, or the taste of sugar, and the smell of a rose, each simple idea is unique, in that each one contains one uniform appearance, and comes out to the proper inlets of a point into each sort. Locke wishes to demonstrate that the basis of knowledge is direct experience of the world rather than links between set of universal notion intrinsic in the mind. While basic conceptions may serve the foundation of knowledge, they are remote from the genius internal conception of things, and are made up of things but incomplete collection of those seeming traits of our senses may discern. As a result, we must exercise caution for attributing attributes found in items to the objects themselves. For our purpose, the concept of simple idea is crucial, as the source of the claim has led to two opposing arguments in artistic research. Either, number one, the content of sensory experience is so unique that it cannot be captured in knowledge claim, and thus art cannot or should not be classified as a form knowledge, or two, the value of art as knowledge is precisely because it has a quality of transcends verbal description, in which the case is the value of vernacular is. While one directly pits uniqueness against the world of generality, two argues that we should seek to define kinds of knowledge and that are adaptable to the uniqueness of the sensory experience. H. Price contends that when anything is offered to awareness, such as a tomato, although its identity can be questioned, what cannot be questioned is the presence of a red circular patch in front of the perceiver. However, the concept of instant familiarity has been criticized for its reliance on a broad intermediary term such as red patch or round and so on. The more far-reaching point is that attention must be made on how the senses are conceptualized. There can never be the pure feeling of the sorts imagined by Locke and Greenberg, since every reference to sense is always influenced by language or theory. In order to maintain the idea that the sense have intrinsic properties, one might think one could turn to the idea of the senses as qualia, the notion that there is something that it is like for me to experience, a certain sensation. But this ignores all the concepts and the awareness that are keeping oneself focused on the present, not to mention the extrinsic details that are introduced as soon as one begins to attain what the likeness is like. There are always limits to empiricism. Modern empiricism has its limitations. The modern empiricism dilemma is that logical conclusion of these phases of modern empiricism contradicts the existence of objective reality. Sense experience, according to traditional empiricists, is the sole guide in our understanding of the universe. It is the only method and criteria of knowing and truth. Both the sophists and the contemporary empiricists in my opinion, have placed a strong focus on how a person learns about the world and life through their senses. However, whether an experience is direct or indirect does not significantly affect how information is learned. At the end of this is just my bibliography. Thank you very much.